Watching Court TV, your front row seat to justice. Let's bring in our guest for this hour, national trial attorney Michael Jaafar. Michael, I'm so glad we get to talk to you about this case because when we're talking about these financial crimes, these are crimes they committed as essentially civil litigation attorneys. Personal injury, wrongful death, that is your wheelhouse. You understand when you're hearing how they handled this scheme. I mean, this is the worst of the worst when it comes to mishandling of things for your client.
Absolutely. If there's a definition of hell for an attorney, it's stealing money from your clients, being convicted of killing your kid, or being convicted of helping somebody who killed their kid steal money from their clients, and you also stole money from your clients. This is the definition of hell. And, you know, when I look at these cases, all I think to myself is this is Shakespeare. You know, this is Shakespearean. This is a tragedy. There are no winners, right? Whatever their motive was, this is the worst of the worst for an attorney, and you could see that man's face. I'm sure they're on suicide watch because this is absolutely atrocious. You can't get worse.
He looks different than Alex Murdaugh did coming into the courtroom. Alex Murdaugh has consistently had a rather upbeat look when he comes into the courtroom, but Cory Fleming seems to really appreciate what this means. He's going to speak, we understand, after the lunch break is done to this judge. Do you think there's anything he can say to the court that's going to lessen his liability in this case?
I think, well, absolutely. What he says is going to matter a lot, right? As attorneys, we've seen these pre-sentence investigation reports given to the judge where they tell her, listen, this is your minimum, this is your maximum, this is what we recommend, this is what we see. We've interviewed the various people, the victims and the defendant, and then the judge has to decide. The judge is a human being just like any of us, and she's going to be looking at body language. She's going to be looking at how emotive somebody is, and I think what he says is going to, I think she's looking to see what he says before she makes her decision. Absolutely.
Yeah, we will see. That's going to happen on the other side, potentially, of this break. We are going to hit the pause button, though, and hear more of that opening statement. You haven't missed a moment of it. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Court TV, your front row seat to justice. I want to bring in, while we're watching this live look, national trial attorney Michael Jaafar, who is here in studio with us. That was a pretty moving opening statement by his attorney, Debbie Barbier. Do you think she's going to convince this judge to do something different than the federal judge who did 4 years?
She did a fantastic job. You could not have done a better job in a sentencing argument on behalf of your client. She went through letters. She did her homework. You could tell that this woman has put dozens upon dozens of hours preparing for this, and she was very eloquent. She did a good job.
Excellent. Thanks so much for those comments, Michael. We're going to get you into court because we understand court is in session. Judges on the bench. We have reached the top of the hour, so we do have to take a break. Our thanks to Michael Jaafar for being on the show today.
Still with us, trial attorney Michael Jaafar. All right, Michael, what did you think of his statement overall?
I think we're watching Shakespeare, basically. You know, this was such a bizarre sentencing. His attorney did an amazing job. The witnesses did an amazing job. But there's such a vast divide between his conduct and what they said. To steal $1 from your client as an attorney is the worst thing you could do in your capacity as an attorney. So I don't think this judge is going to be lenient on him. And besides, this judge is going to be looking at the public and showing the public, hey, I'm going to take a strong stance against what he did, and I'm not going to be swayed by the supporting witnesses.
And I think, to your point, it's because this judge, he doesn't really play, and he, I think, knows and may agree that doing this is one of the worst things you can do as an attorney. I mean, it's the golden rule. You don't violate, and here he's done it, millions of dollars.
State judges are different than federal judges. They're closer to their community than the federal judges. They run for re-election. They have fundraisers. Federal judges are appointed, you know, by the president. So the state judge is always going to be closer to their community, and they're going to do something more in favor of the community than a federal judge would do.
All right, so he said all the right words. He apologized to the community, to the families, to his wife, to his children, his parents. He said, I will spend the rest of my life in shame, turmoil inflicted on my family. So he said all the right things. Were you moved by it?
A little bit moved by the tenant. I was also a little bit moved by the fact that he drove to school for 15 years, the daughter of a single parent. I don't drive my own kids to school, right? I mean, they described a saint here. I was a little bit moved by it. But again, if it wasn't for him actually stealing money from helpless people, he didn't just steal money from a CEO. He didn't steal $5,000 from somebody who'd made millions a year. He stole money from people who were helpless, who trusted him. That would always bring me back, if I were a judge or any kind of a spectator, to say, you know what, at the end of the day, you did the worst of the worst. He wouldn't have been caught if his best friend did not murder his family.
And that's what I'm stuck on. I don't think he would have been caught, Michael, at all. All right, we're going to get you right back into court. I understand one of the attorneys is now speaking.
All right, here to discuss in the studio is national trial attorney Michael Jaafar. Michael, thank you so much for joining me here in the studio. And I got to say, the defense is checking off all the boxes. The questions I had going into their case to explain her actions before, during, and after, they're ticking those boxes. They're ticking it with some really impressive experts. Your thoughts?
I agree. The defense have done a masterful job. I think they've really, in my opinion, met their burden that this was, not guilty by temporary insanity. Whether or not do I believe that the Akron jury will actually go with that, that's a different story. But I do believe that the defense has checked off the boxes.
All right,
their experts are awesome.
That's your area, right? You're in that sort of Midwestern area, right? Why do you say it that way, whether an Ohio jury will find it that way? Because, again, they're ticking off the boxes. The questions I have, I consider myself a juror. Our viewers are jurors. You're a juror in many, many ways. So you don't know if they're going to be convinced.
Unfortunately, in my opinion, and my observation is, most of the American people just, they've tuned out to the whole temporary insanity defense for many reasons. They've moved in the direction where they looked at that defense incorrectly so as a fraud, as a ruse. You have nothing else to say. Just take your time, admit that you did something wrong. Again, I don't agree with that, but the understanding of mental health issues in our country is so slim that I think jurors just tune that out. Hey, I'm in Akron, Ohio. Society has beat me down. I go to work. I pay my bills. I don't hurt anybody. You're a spoiled kid. You went to school. A lot of ignorance comes in for many, many reasons ever since the 80s. It's just turned into a situation where it's a big Hail Mary. As an attorney, I can tell you this is a big Hail Mary, and this is the only choice that the defense has.
Fair enough, and I can tell you overwhelmingly online, that's how people feel. They feel that she's faking it and they're not buying it. But again, we're about halfway through the defense's case. As you said, they're doing a masterful job. We'll have to see. All right, stand by. Come. All right, still with us, national trial attorney Michael Jaafar. And Michael, I thought the defense hit all the right notes. He had the mea culpa. He was clearly sorry for his actions, hoping to learn, brought some great people in. But Judge Newman, I was afraid that he wasn't going to buy a lot of it, and I don't think he did. He said his job is not about leniency, it's about justice and mercy. So it was an interesting statement by him, and then hit him with 20 years.
I thought it was a mistake. I thought it was an overreach. 20 years for something like that,
He was facing 80, Mike.
Yeah, no, I still, but, when you saw the overwhelming amount of people who came into the courtroom to vouch for him, some of the victims forgave him. He did something wrong. Listen, stealing $1 from your clients as an attorney means you should be disbarred and never practice again. You're not fit to be in that profession. 20 years on top of 4 years for what he did. I think what was weighing in the judge's mind and why I could kind of justify 20 years is, had his co-conspirator not murdered his family, Mr. Fleming would never have been caught. So he probably thought he wasn't going to get caught. He probably thought he'd get away with it. That must have weighed in the judge's mind.
Yeah, and you're right. When you talk about it that way, you come into court now, you've been caught, and you have the mea culpa. But back then, when you were getting away with it, it wasn't any problem at all. So it's clear that Judge Clifton Newman might have seen it that way. That's absolutely sure. But again, when you look at crimes like this, these are financial crimes, but I think what makes these different is the fiduciary relationship. And as you said, as an attorney, I think that's what takes this to another level.
Yeah, I know attorneys who have stolen from clients, and we found out about it because the attorney himself brought it to light, reported himself, reported to his clients, gave the money back, and handed in his license. In those cases, I didn't even see those attorneys get charged with crimes, right? They were disbarred. In this case, it was exposed because of his co-conspirator did the most heinous thing, murdered his family. And this guy never reported. So I think it's too little too late in the judge's mind. Yeah,
I think you're right about that. Quickly, I only have 30 seconds left. Harpootlian wants to continue to fight this. He wants to go to trial. He just pled guilty in federal court to basically the same charges. Why?
I think he has no choice because the offer on the table was your client will basically serve life without parole, and they still have an eye towards the mother case, which is them trying to get a new trial on the murder case. And if they agree to this and they plead guilty now, and that issue becomes moot. This is a Hail Mary for them.
Yeah,
they have no choice.
They've been throwing up a lot of those
Yes.
for Alec Murdoch.
Yes.
All right, still here to discuss is national trial attorney Michael Jaafar here in the studio. And Michael, I mean, that particular witness, she's got to be, you know, she found him on Tinder. And so she's got to be, I dated a guy on Tinder who ended up killing somebody. She's got to feel lucky. But here's what I want to talk to you about. Today, the judge basically told the defense they want to bring in a suicide risk expert. Of course, they're claiming that he went there with the intention of talking to her. And we know they found that syringe of nicotine, that was really for him. If things didn't go the way they wanted, he was going to kill himself, not her, because we know it was a lethal dose that was in that syringe. So they want to bring in this risk expert, the suicide risk expert. The judge said the only way he's going to let that risk expert testify is if this defendant is going to take the stand. So before I rule, you need to tell me, defense, if he's going to take the stand. What do you think of that? I've never seen it before.
I think it's a shameful mistake, because you have a constitutional right to bring any witnesses that could help you in your defense. You also have a constitutional right to not testify in your own defense. So the judge is saying, I will not let you enjoy one constitutional right unless you waive the other constitutional right. It's outrageous. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think of is, in order for it, in his mind, to be relevant, there has to be some testimony from the defendant about his state of mind. Because what he did tell the defense was that this guy can talk about suicidal risks, but can't talk about the state of mind of the defendant, right? So he can talk about generalities, but not about this defendant. So that's the only thing I can think. Maybe there's a relevancy issue.
Yeah, I could see how he would think that. But if the suicide expert were to testify and then the defendant didn't testify, I could see in closing arguments his counsel putting the pieces together for the jury and say he was going to kill himself, because one of the things you could do as a defense attorney is say, my client didn't do it, somebody else did it, or maybe somebody else did it. So, I mean, it becomes a thing where, if you don't think it's going to be helpful to him, Your Honor, why care? Why not let us try it? This is what we want to do. And by the way, he may testify. Yeah. We just don't want to agree to it right now, because if you're the defense, you don't know if your client's going to testify until the last moment for a reason.
Sure.
So the judge is forcing them to make that decision early on in the case. I think that's the basis of his mistake.
I think the defendant has to testify, because the claim by the defense is that he went there for this particular purpose, not to kill her, just wanted to talk. We know that he lied in wait because things didn't happen until she already came home, changed into her nightgown. I think he has to get up and tell this story and his thoughts to this jury.
I completely agree with you. I think this is one of those cases where he cannot avoid testifying. Whether or not he should decide on that now, that's where I think the judge made a mistake. But I completely agree with you. Us as attorneys, if we had this client, we would be telling them, prepare yourself, you're testifying. You got to fight for your life, because no one's going to get you off except for yourself. You have to explain why you were there and how things went wrong. Only two people were in that room, you and a person who's dead. You got to tell the jury why she died. Yeah, no question. And again, their claim is that he wanted to talk. She was so afraid that she then went out to the balcony and fell over. It was an accident. It's basically a matter of degree for them. They're agreeing. They're basically saying he was there. So at the end of the day, I think he has to get up on that stand and tell his story. Completely agree. He can't avoid it, because no one's going to tell that story. He doesn't testify, guaranteed he's getting convicted.
All right. Michael Jaafar, thank you so much for joining us here in studio. Always appreciate your presence. Hopefully you'll come back and join us again. Truly appreciate it.